LSU could be down two key defenders against Vanderbilt. We've got the latest. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. The first injury report or availability report of the week from the mandated by the Southeastern Conference was released on Wednesday night. And it is concerning for LSU, in particular regarding Whit Weeks and Bernard Gooden. I will get to what I mean here in just a minute, but let's go back to Monday. Brian Kelly meeting with reporters at his Monday press conference. He gave a roundup of the injury situation. Again, this was Brian Kelly on Monday. Give a listen.
Aaron Anderson looked good. We'll continue to progress with him. Caden Durham had, a hip pointer, which was mild, but one that affected him a little bit. He'll be fine. Braylon Moore had a stinger, but under control. We took an MRI. It looked good. Paul Mabenga is making progress. We expect him to be available this week. And Nussmeier had a slight ankle sprain, not a high ankle sprain, but a medial. And we feel like he's going to be fine. So those are the top guys. We talked about Gooden with the collarbone, Jamari with the ankle. And then Whit Weeks is just from his injury, he's sore. But that's our entire injury report.
Okay. So Aaron Anderson, good. Caden Durham, hip. He'll be fine. Braylon Moore had a stinger, but he's okay. Mabenga's going to be good to go. Nuss had an ankle, but not a big deal. He'll be good. And then he talked about Bernard Gooden. By the way, this is 15 seconds on Bernard Gooden real quick.
Collarbone, bruised collarbone. Very sore right now. But clean, no break. So this is a short time thing, and one he'll have to manage the pain relative to how we go through the week.
Okay. And then Jamari Butler, ankles, fine. It is concerning now that was Monday. Wednesday night, LSU had to put out an availability report, which every team in the SEC is mandated to do by the league office. Now, we know Gabe Relaford is out. He's out for the season. But the injury designations for several other players are concerning. Bernard Gooden has been labeled as doubtful at this point by Wednesday. I mean, you're talking about just about, 60 hours from kickoff thereabouts at the time this came out, and Bernard Gooden is doubtful. And then questionable, Whit Weeks and Jamari Butler, probable, Aaron Anderson and Paul Mabenga, and then Nussmeier and Caden Durham and Braylon Moore weren't even listed on the injury report, so they're fine. But the doubtful for Gooden and the questionable for Weeks and Butler becomes a massive deal as this week progresses. Remember, the thing that Vanderbilt does very well is run the football. Okay, they're a team that wants to line up and run the ball with a lot of misdirection. Diego Pavia can obviously run the football. We saw them bust off a big 65-yard touchdown against Alabama. We saw Diego Pavia bust off a long run against Alabama. This is a team that on the season, by the way, averages 6.6 yards per carry. Let me say that again slowly. This is a Vanderbilt offense that averages 6.6 yards per carry. Through 6 games, 191 rushing attempts, 6.6 yards per carry. And before you say, oh, well, that's skewed because they played Charleston Southern and Georgia State, and they did that, and they scored 70 points, by the way, against Georgia State. If you go look just at the Alabama game, they ran it for 135 yards and an average of 7.1 yards per carry against Alabama. And you can say, oh, well, they had a couple of long runs, but you can't omit the long runs. Though that's how they play. They try to set you up with the pound, boom, pop the big one. Another SEC game against South Carolina. They won that game 31-7. The caveat is Lenora Sellers got knocked out, didn't play the second half. And so Vanderbilt was able to control the ball, and they did. And they won 31-7. But in that game, Vanderbilt ran it 37 times for 4 yards a carry. So the point is they want to run the football. So you need to be really stout and sound in your defensive front. This was thought to be your defensive front, the deepest part of the team, maybe aside from receiver. Remember, you went and added 3 defensive ends in the portal in addition to Gabe Relaford. Well, we know Relaford's out for the season. If you're down Butler as well, now you're down 2 of your 4, and that leaves you with Patrick Payton and Jack Pyburn, who are outstanding players, but you want a rotation to keep guys fresh. This is what bit you against Ole Miss. Now, Dylan Carpenter, who's a local kid in his 3rd year from Sanama, is certainly trying to get more reps, but he played 9 reps against Ole Miss and just 13 reps last week against South Carolina. I don't know that you're in a position where you want Dylan Carpenter out there playing 30, 40, 50 reps on the road in a conference game. So that's a real concern with Relaford out and Butler as questionable. Now, the other player that's questionable is Whit Weeks. And Whit Weeks might be your best defensive player. I can hear a case for Monsoor Delane and AJ Halsey, and you've got some Harold Perkins, some terrific players. But Whit Weeks is your Mike linebacker. He's got 29 tackles on the season. AJ Halsey and West Weeks lead the team in tackles. Then Devon Keys, Tamarcus Cooley, and Whit Weeks. But remember, Whit Weeks, while he's played in 6 games, it's really 5 because after just 3 snaps against Florida, he missed the remainder of that game after the targeting penalty. So really, he's where he is statistically after playing in just 5 games instead of 6. And so if Whit Weeks isn't there, now you're talking about West Weeks, Devon Keys, and then the next up might be a guy like, I don't know. Is it Zach Weeks who would be next up? Maybe Tylen Singleton, who's played in all 6 games but has just 3 tackles. The point is, with all of this, your defensive front is supposed to be your strength because of your depth. Well, with these injury concerns, your depth now is very much called into question if these guys are limited or unable to go, and they need to be stout in this game in particular against a team that's going to try to run the ball for the majority of this football game, especially because of the advantage you have in the secondary with Monsoor Delane and PJ Woodland and AJ Halsey and Tamarcus Cooley and a Vanderbilt offense that can throw it, but that's certainly not what they want to lead with. So I'm not trying to sound the alarm. It's Wednesday. I'm very concerned that Bernard Gooden can't go because, remember, if Gooden can't go, then on your interior defensive line rotation, you're down to Ahmad Bro, Dom McKinley, Jacobian Guillory, and then probably Walter Mathis, a true freshman, would be the next guy up. But Bernard Gooden has been your most productive interior defensive lineman. Gooden has 13 tackles on the season, but he's got 1.5 tackles for loss. He's got 3 quarterback hurries. Like, he's that disruptive guy in the middle. So I'm sorry, three tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. So he's your disruptive guy on the interior and has been your most productive guy on the interior. If you remove him, which it sounds like with him being doubtful now on Wednesday that he won't play, all of a sudden, a real position of strength across your defensive front is very much now weakened, and you have to rely on unproven depth against the Vanderbilt team that's going to try to run the ball right at your very weakened depth in your defensive front. So we'll continue to see how this progresses as we get closer to Saturday, but this is something we absolutely have to keep an eye on as we get closer to this game. Now, Brian Kelly did also give an update on Aaron Anderson, and this is the good news.
He went, the entire day and felt pretty good. His player load was good. We kind of monitor those things for our wide receivers, but the knee that he's had, most of his problems with is one that gets inflamed. And again, he's not 100%, and he's a guy that needs to play fast and free. And he just wasn't in that mindset this past weekend, but he is in practice this week. So we expect him to do a nice job for us.
So that's fantastic news for an LSU offense that will have a big advantage with its receivers against a really average Vanderbilt secondary, which is allowing over 220 pass yards per game, allowed 340 through the air against Alabama. You have opportunity there if you can keep Garrett Nussmeier upright, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but having Aaron Anderson back would be terrific. But these defensive injuries are a big concern heading into Vanderbilt. Today's episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with SupplyHouse. Order today and see the parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. You want to bet on the Tigers and the Commodores or your favorite NFL game this weekend? You can do it at FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. That's FanDuel.com. It's kind of a teacher versus pupil moment again Saturday as Brian Kelly and Clark Lea will face off again. Remember, Clark Lea was on Brian Kelly's staff at Notre Dame, initially under Mike Elko, and then was hired as the defensive coordinator when Elko left to begin his head coaching career. But Brian Kelly on the SEC coaches teleconference kind of gave a little background between he and Clark Lea and their professional relationship.
Well, when Mike Elko was my defensive coordinator, Mike and Clark knew each other very well, worked together, and so there was an existing relationship there. So I brought him in when Mike was my defensive coordinator as a linebacker coach. So, got a great opportunity to see him firsthand, work firsthand with him prior to elevating him to the coordinator's position when Mike left to be the DC at A&M.
It's really interesting when you look at this matchup, in particular Clark Lea, because Lea played at Vanderbilt. He was a fullback, and it's rare that you see a guy who played one side of the ball go into coaching and specialize on the other side of the ball. But that's what's happened here with Clark Lea, who was a fullback at Vanderbilt, but made his hay as a coach, as an assistant. You heard Brian Kelly say first as a linebacker coach, then as a defensive coordinator on the defensive side of the ball. And which is why it's even more interesting now, because Vanderbilt, has put together a really strong staff. Jerry Kill, the former Minnesota and New Mexico State head coach, is a special assistant to Clark Lea, the head coach. You've got real talented veteran staff members that Clark Lea's hired on his staff. But Clark Lea is a fantastic defensive mind. So this is really an interesting matchup when it's going to be LSU against Vanderbilt. and you have a head coach who is a really good defensive mind trying to game plan. And Clark Lea on the SEC coaches teleconference gave a little bit of a background on what he thought about this matchup against the LSU offense.
You have to play disciplined in your structure and in so many ways be willing to absorb yards and fight against points. What I've starting this morning talking to the team about is just, do we have the patience? Do we have the patience to fight for every blade of grass? Do we have the patience to execute as the field space tightens in the red zone? Look, South Carolina misfits a run and it rips for 50 plus yards. That's a reality. So all these guys they have are dangerous. They're all talented people. And then can we be opportunistic on third downs? If you look back at the Alabama game, you'd say that's where we want to improve performance, getting off the field. We have to create possession time for our offense. This is going to be two methodical offenses, and so possessions are going to be hard to come by.
I don't think it's any coincidence you heard Clark Lea talk about possession time. Now think about what I just said as we led the show here, talking about LSU and some of their issues in the defensive front. LSU is going to want to certainly score, but also possess the football so that depth on the defensive front isn't exposed. So Clark Lea's not wrong there. Even before the injury report came out, he knew that that was going to be a real key to this game. And when you look at this LSU offense, it hasn't been an offense that really has been the quick strike. Look, when you look at LSU's touchdown drives, they hit the big play, to Kyle Parker at the start of the second half, but this has also been a team that has put together some long drives. At the end of the game, LSU put together a 10-play, 64-yard drive that ate up 4 minutes of clock to kind of get through the end of the game. So that's what this LSU team kind of is and has been. The question is, can you avoid the critical mistake, the penalty to put you behind the sticks? That's what Clark Lea is alluding to there. And obviously, the onus is on Garrett Nussmeier to make sure he avoids the negative plays like the sacks, the TFLs, but also making sure that he protects the football, which he did not do against South Carolina with the 2 costly interceptions. And Clark Lea kind of gave his impression of what he's seen from Garrett Nussmeier.
Well, the quarterback's really good, and I thought he played really well against us a year ago. One of the things about him too is, we have him at 20 miles an hour on the GPS. He's athletic. If you have open lanes in your pass rush, he's gonna find ways through and can hurt you running too. But obviously his skill set is getting the ball out quickly. I think he avoids sacks as good as anyone in the country because he knows where to go with the ball. He's throwing it to really talented people.
I want to put some context on what Clark Lea said there about Nussmeier avoiding sacks as well as anybody. So Vanderbilt is really good at pressuring the quarterback. Through 6 games, Vanderbilt is tied for 14th in the country with 18 sacks. And by the way, there's not an outlier. It's not like in one game against an FCS, they had like 9 sacks. They got 18 sacks in 6 games, 3, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4. And the 4 was against Alabama. So in 4 of their 6 games, they've had 3 sacks, and one of them they had 2, one they had 4. So they're averaging 3 a game, and that's been really consistent. LSU, on the other hand, has only allowed 7 sacks the entire season in 6 games. That's in large part because of what Clark Lea just said. You have a veteran in Garrett Nussmeier who has quick decision-making and gets rid of the football. And so Clark Lea kind of talked about it on the SEC coaches teleconference, the importance of getting pressure on Garrett Nussmeier.
Obviously, he does a good job getting rid of the ball. So sometimes that's going to be getting hands up and hoping to impact the flight of the ball. If you can steal an incompletion that way, that's great. If you can speed up his timing, right? He does a good job when he sees it clearly getting the ball out. But if we can somehow speed up that operation, I think a lot of the pressure comes down to those critical third down or conversion down snaps where, can we find a way to manipulate a protection to get a free runner or compress a pocket on a 3rd and long situation where routes can't develop to the sticks, that becomes the way to win the game. He's going to make it hard on you on early downs just because of how smart he is and how well he sees the field. But there will be opportunities for us in determined pass downs to create a little push, and that's been a focus for our defensive line.
Both of these coaches are being very candid in their game plan because you don't have to be a football savant to understand how this game is going to be won. Vanderbilt is top 20 in the country in run defense. Pass defense, they allow 222 pass yards a game. Bama threw it for 340. Utah State threw it for 274. they don't have great athletes on the back end. So they try to pressure the ball, get you into 3rd and long, which are obvious pass situations, as you heard Clark Lea say, where they can then put pressure on the quarterback to force incompletions and then a punt. That's what he's saying. So the key is to get LSU, from Vanderbilt's perspective, is to get LSU into obvious passing downs. Flip it, the key for LSU is to avoid obvious passing downs. So you want to be effective running the football, but you also want to be efficient passing to make sure that you stay in 2nd and 3rd and manageable, so you're not predictable by down and distance, allowing Vanderbilt to crank up the pressure and affect Garrett Nussmeier like they have a lot of the quarterbacks they've played this year. So the game plan is really easy. Of course, both teams want to be balanced, but Vanderbilt wants to run the football and possess it and keep the LSU defense on the field, take advantage of maybe what could be a limited team. LSU defensively wants to stop Vanderbilt from running the ball, force them into throwing, because that's not Pavia's strong suit. And LSU secondary is great. Vanderbilt doesn't have great defensive backs. The flip side of it is Vanderbilt wants to keep LSU in 3rd and long and make Nussmeier throw the ball in obvious passing situations like you saw against Ole Miss and affect him that way. LSU wants to be able to hit big plays in the passing game because that's where they have a real advantage, which then would open up the running game. So it's easy to know what the game plans are. Executing those game plans is the difficult part. We'll see on Saturday which team is better at doing just that. Just a fascinating cat and mouse back and forth. Of course, Vanderbilt is coming off an open day. Clark Lea talked a little bit about how they made use of that time. And also, a new mock draft is out. And there is an LSU player in the 1st round, but it may not be who you think. We'll tell you what that is as we wrap up next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. See, Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail. From the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery, you can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls, with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. LSU, of course, is coming off its bye and then win over South Carolina. Meanwhile, Clark Lea and Vanderbilt had an open date this past week after their loss to Alabama. And Clark Lea on the SC Coaches Teleconference talked about how they used that bye week.
Well, we needed it. We've been relatively healthy, but we needed a mental reset. And I think that's true of every team. I mean, training camp plus 6 games is a long time to stay in process. So, but I also feel like on the flip side of that, there's something about staying in the rhythm. You miss being out there on Saturday. It's hard sometimes to watch games on the bye week just because, you feel like you should be prepping yourself. So we took advantage of getting a couple days. It also lined up with our academic calendars, fall break. So we were able to get the guys home, and, it's been good to get back on the field. And obviously, anytime you're playing against LSU, you're playing against a really good team, and it creates a big stage. So we're excited for that opportunity.
A really good LSU team with really good talent. And my contention has been that there's going to be a great illustration of how much talent is on this LSU team come April when the NFL draft rolls around. Now, I understand LSU is here about to play a game against Vanderbilt and try to move to 6-1 on the season and continue progressing toward a playoff. But we're getting to that point in the season now when you have 6 games and the sample size has grown. You're going to start to see things like big boards and mock drafts and things like that. Mel Kiper from ESPN earlier this week came out with his big board, his top 25 overall prospects. Well, Jordan Reed from ESPN published his first mock draft, and they used the current standings in the NFL to determine who picked where in the mock draft. It won't hold like this, obviously, because, for example, the Jets were the number 1 overall pick, but number 2 was the Baltimore Ravens. Well, the Ravens are 1-5, so I suffice to say that when Lamar Jackson comes back, the Ravens are going to win games and they're not going to pick 2nd overall, but just for the sake of the argument right now. But there was an LSU player that Jordan Reed from ESPN did mock in round one. And it's not who you think. Most mock drafts as the season started had Garrett Nussmeier somewhere hovering around the top 10. Nussmeier's not in round one. There have been some that we saw before the season that mocked Aaron Anderson or Nick Anderson in round one, and it's neither of those guys. Harold Perkins, of course, has spent a lot of times top draft boards. So, too, has Whit Weeks been projected in his junior draft year as someone who could potentially leave early and be a high draft pick, but it's neither one of those guys as well. The player that Jordan Reed has going in round one from LSU is Monsoor Delane. And not only does he have him going in round one, he has Monsoor Delane as the first cornerback off the board, 13th overall to the Carolina Panthers. And Jordan Reed, in no uncertain terms, states Monsoor Delane is the best cornerback in the 2026 draft and would fit well with the Panthers secondary that allows opposing quarterbacks a QBR of 63.7, sixth worst in the NFL. Goes on to talk about Delane excelling, transferring from Virginia Tech, opponents completing just 24% of their passes into his coverage this season, which is sixth best in the FBS. High praise there for Monsoor Delane. And that's something Brian Kelly said on Monday. They kind of had a feeling they knew they were getting whenever they recruited Delane out of the portal.
Thought we got the best corner in the portal, and he is playing to that level. You hope that you've made a good decision in vetting out all of the opportunities that are there, but he has delivered. He's purposeful in his work. He is fearless in his preparation, and then plays fearlessly with no fear in the game because he knows he can do it. That's a great mix for a corner.
Monsoor Delane will have a chance at a big opportunity this weekend against Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. But the college football world collectively is taking notice, even if he's barely being targeted because teams are just avoiding him altogether. See if Delane has a big day on Saturday in Nashville. We're going to keep counting you down to LSU and Vanderbilt. We're glad to have you aboard with us here. Hey, if you're listening on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And please let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.